In our last video, we converted a mangled young forest into a lovely, beautiful forest. How we did it is not rocket science. It's basically stand improvement work on steroids. Stand improvement work is a practice well known in the industry, and its principles are detailed in many different books. What we do differently is we use stand improvement work every time we go into the woods, and we adjust those principles based on what we learn. So it's a constantly changing process. And the most important point is we limit the rate of cut in the future and every time we go in so that the ancient trees will develop again. As long as you stick to the math, the trees will grow. As long as you stick to the stand improvement work, the forest improvement will continually get better. And I screwed up again, but we'll cut it later. Thank you. There's no substitute for being in the woods. The views, the tastes, the smells, the wildlife. The overall feeling is hard to transfer to a screen. But a screen has many advantages too. For example, we can show the same hillside from different angles and flip back and forth in time to get a multi-dimensional take on what has been done. Thinning is the main tool we use. It's a powerful transformative process with many offshoots. When we started thinning in 1996, we decided to remove most of the cut trees to sell firewood. We did it carefully to protect the soil and thought it was a good way to pay for the thinning costs. We'd leave the tops and branches, we'd cut them up and scatter them so they'd lay flat on the ground less than a foot high. This way they'd decompose faster and be less of a long-term fire hazard. The scattered small branches created a green carpet that protected the soil and fed it, and we loved how this lopping and scattering work left the ground like a clean park. But after a few years, the small branches and leaves quickly decomposed after feeding the soil. This left little else to continue to protect or feed the soil. The soil overall was now just too exposed. We had removed the mangled mess of trees, but had now allowed the wind to move unimpeded through the newly formed understory. This resulted in a drying out of the mostly barren soil. We had made a substantial mistake. To fix it, we quickly ended the firewood business in 2002. We began to leave the downed trees on the ground to build the soil productivity long term. We learned how downwoody debris adds moisture retention capacity, and over time learned about the many other soil and habitat positives we knew little about when we got started. Thinning involves weighing often competing factors. You have to experiment as you discover the pros and cons of being too conservative versus too aggressive. And looming over all of it is fire. Nothing can set back a restoration project faster. Fire is a natural part of the life cycle of a forest. If the forest has not had its structure dramatically altered by man, a typical cyclical fire will mostly burn moderately and be a net positive because it'll clear out the fuels for future fires, it'll kill mostly weaker trees, and create openings for new growth, along with many other benefits. So a principal offshoot of thinning is to mimic the best effects of a moderate intensity fire. To know what can be accomplished, a good place to start is to first get a good feel for what a hillside looked like before. We know similar quality hillsides averaged under 100 trees an acre before logging, and that a couple dozen big redwood and Doug fir trees with a few scattered sugar pines made up the canopy. These hillsides can grow magnificent trees to about 5 or 6 foot in diameter and up to 200 feet in height. Each hillside is different. Some areas are poor quality or extremely steep, and others, near creeks usually, are capable of growing much larger trees. When this hillside's ancient forest was cut in '64, the tall canopy disappeared. The soil was suddenly exposed to the sun in over 80% of the area. And the pioneering trees, the tan oaks and the Douglas firs, took off everywhere there was sun. Within 3 decades, we had 10 times more tan oaks and Doug firs than before. And the branches reached to the ground. These hillsides of tightly packed small trees, full of limbs, was the ideal towering inferno scenario. If a ground fire started here, little could survive a fire of this intensity. So we thinned with several things in mind. Protect the soil, remove the poorly formed, the dying, and the suppressed trees, favor the best trees, and address the huge fire hazard and risk of insect infestation. It was a lot, and so of course, we got some of it wrong. We cut hundreds of small firs and tan oaks, and favored the underrepresented redwoods and sugar pines. But all the while we were fretting about not opening the young canopy too much. After so much work, we didn't want the pioneering tan oak and Douglas fir to come roaring back if we let too much sun hit the ground again. We played it safe and kept the canopy mostly closed. When we returned in 2025, we realized that having kept the canopy closed did succeed in keeping the tan oak and Douglas fir from regenerating aggressively again. The quality of the remaining stand was much better. It was also much larger. But we found many trees that were still struggling and suppressed. When we thinned in '96, we just didn't have enough vigorous trees to keep the canopy closed. And instead of punching some holes in the canopy, we idealistically kept some marginal trees instead, thinking that they would recover and get stronger. They didn't. So about 2/3 of the trees grew at a decent pace in most areas and had some good form and vigor. This alone was a big second win. But we had made two mistakes. First, we didn't create enough openings for the conifers to develop sufficiently in the 30 years that had passed. And secondly, we had left way too many marginal trees at the same time that took resources away from the more vigorous neighbors. Practicing ancient trees forestry is a balancing act. You want moderate growth because opening the canopy too much creates conditions for too many pioneering trees to come roaring back. Today, the stand has a good balance of canopy openings, spacing, and tree quality. The species composition is again similar to what it was in 1964. And most importantly, with the spacing that we have helped create now, the canopy will again be dominated by a dozen 4 to 5 foot diameter mature trees in the next 30 years, just as it was before. This will be the case even if we never enter this stand again. You see, the hard work is done. It's not easy, and you won't get rich financially from it, but you'll find richness in ways that I think are at least equally important and will surprise you. Thank you for watching. If you have comments, suggestions, you know what to do.